Hello and welcome. Right now, the weather across India is, well, it's complicated. The big southwest monsoon is officially supposed to be over, but for millions, the rain is still coming down. And at the same time, the northeast monsoon is just waiting to make its entrance. So what on earth is going on? Let's get into this atmospheric tug of war. So yeah, let's start with the biggest question on everyone's mind. Is the southwest monsoon really over? I mean, the calendar says the season ended in September, but if you're living anywhere along the West Coast, you know the sky is telling a completely different story. The rain just hasn't stopped, and we're about to dig into exactly why. Here's how we're going to break it all down for you. First, we'll look at the big picture of this monsoon transition. Then we'll get into the two major weather systems that are calling the shots right now. After that, we'll cover a really important weather concept that drives this whole thing. And then we'll get to the specifics, state-by-state forecasts, and finally, we'll zoom right in on what's happening in Tamil Nadu. All right, let's kick things off with the basics of this seasonal changeover. You know, it's not like flipping a switch. It's a gradual and, honestly, sometimes pretty messy process. So to really get what's happening, you have to know that India basically has two different monsoon seasons, each with its own personality. First, you've got the southwest monsoon. It's driven by these southwesterly winds that just soak the west coast and central India from June to September. Then, the winds do a complete 180, and the northeast monsoon arrives, bringing northeasterly winds and rain mostly to the southeastern coast. They're two totally separate events that happen one after the other. But here's the catch right now. The retreat of the southwest monsoon has pretty much hit the brakes. It's just stalled out over central India. We're not really expecting it to pack its bags and leave until after October 7th or 8th. So, what's causing the delay? Well, it's all because of a couple of stubborn weather systems that just refuse to let the season end. Okay, so let's track these systems. We've got two main players on the board at the moment, one in the Arabian Sea and another one that's cooking up in the Bay of Bengal. And believe me, their movements are dictating the weather for millions of people. First up, let's look to the west. There's a system that is weakened into what we call a low-pressure area. Just think of it as a zone of rising air that tends to bring clouds and rain. Right now, it's just kind of hanging out over Gujarat and Maharashtra. It's expected to linger there for about another day before it slowly drifts out into the Arabian Sea. This is the guy that's feeding all that moisture to the west coast. Meanwhile, all the way on the other side of India, a brand new system is getting organized. As we speak, there's a circulation over Myanmar. Within about 24 hours, that's expected to become a cyclonic circulation, which is basically a large-scale swirl of winds over the North Andaman Sea. And then by October 1st or 2nd, the forecast says it'll become a low-pressure area in the Bay of Bengal. This is the one we really need to keep an eye on for the East Coast. So we've got these two systems pulling the strings, but what's the real, fundamental force driving this whole seasonal shift? It turns out there's one core concept that explains why one monsoon ends and the next one begins, and it's the key to understanding everything we're seeing. And that concept is called the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITZZ for short. Now, the easiest way to picture it is as a giant seasonal weather belt that wraps around the Earth near the equator. It's the meeting point, the convergence zone, where winds from the northern and southern hemispheres run into each other. And its position is tied directly to the sun. And here is the absolute key. As the sun appears to move south after the summer, this entire weather belt, the ITCZ, drifts south with it. That southward movement is the trigger. It is the fundamental reason the winds over India flip, changing from the southwesterlies of summer to the northeasterlies of winter. This shift is the real engine behind the entire change of seasons. All right, so we've covered the science behind it all. Now let's get practical. What does this actually mean for the weather where you are? What can you expect over the next few days? Because of that lingering system in the Arabian Sea and those stalled southwest monsoon winds, the west coast is going to stay very, very wet. For Kerala and the coastal and Malanadu districts of Karnataka, you can expect widespread moderate to heavy rain. And for the Konkan coast and Gujarat, the forecast is even more intense. We're talking heavy to very heavy rainfall. Okay, let's shift over to the east. Coastal Andhra Pradesh is looking at widespread thunder showers, with some heavy spells definitely possible. But if you move inland, areas like North Rayalaseema will probably just see some light rain. Over in Telangana, the rain will be focused in the southeastern parts, which could see some moderate to heavy showers, but Hyderabad city itself will likely only get light rain. And finally, that brings us to Tamil Nadu, which is in a really interesting spot right now. While its neighbors are getting soaked, the weather here is telling a completely different story. So let's break down why that is. This is the question I'm sure a lot of you are asking. Kerala is getting pounded by rain, but you just go over the mountains into Tamil Nadu, and for the most part, it's dry. How can two states right next to each other have such completely different weather right now? The answer comes down to one meteorological term: wind shear. You see, those super strong southwesterly winds from the monsoon are just blasting across Tamil Nadu. And they're moving at different speeds, at different heights, which basically shreds the clouds before they can grow tall enough to produce heavy rain. It's kind of paradoxical, but the strength of the monsoon wind itself is what's keeping most of the state dry. No, of course, there are some exceptions. The areas that are nestled right up against the Western Ghats can still get some rain. We're talking places like Valparai and the Nilgiris, Kordalam and Tenkasi, and parts of Kanyakumari. But for most of the state, that wind shear is just too strong. But listen up, this dry pattern won't last forever. Forecasters are looking at a pretty big shift right around October 3rd. From that day on, as those monsoon winds finally start to change direction, we expect widespread heat-driven thunderstorms to make a big comeback all across Tamil Nadu. And so, all of this leaves us with one last massive question. We have these low-pressure systems bubbling up in both seas during a really volatile transition period. The big thing we all need to watch for now is whether either of these systems has what it takes to strengthen into a cyclone. That, right there, is the major wild card as we head into October.